Well, happy Sunday everybody. I hope all of you are well and enjoyed the Grand Prix that we just had. Predictable result in the end for the most part, but still, race day is always a good day. You join me for the final episode at long last of the first season of my team and another special stream because this is the last one that looks like this with this crappy, boring layout. We have some fancy new graphics and fancy electronic gizmos and touchscreen stuff that will be coming this week and getting set up, and then hopefully if the show looks less inept, maybe I'll be less inept. You never know your luck. We have 2 rounds to go and we're going to blast through them really quickly. That gives me more time then to work on the Failcast F1 podcast stream, which returns season 11. 11 years. I'm old. I'm really old. We're back Saturday, 4 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. Central European time, and we'll be covering all the latest F1 news and nonsense. Have a sip of my ethically sourced cola. It is high-class swanky time around here. Okay, I'm not going to bother changing tyre allocation. We're just going to go see what we can do. The power unit will be in shreds by the time we get to Abu Dhabi, but that's fine. Brazil's where we're looking for a result. It's a track I'm quite good at, and if our performance in Mexico and America is anything to go by, particularly America where we got a podium out of nowhere, the track has some similar characteristics. If the car performs the same, then there's no reason why we can't pull out a good result. So instead of just assuming that we're going to go out in Q1, I'm actually coming into this in the mindset of pushing for Q3. Maybe we get disappointed, but still, I think all in all, it's been a very strong first season. I didn't think we'd be anywhere near as competitive as we have been. I don't know how things are going to look next season with the formula changing already. We've not yet safeguarded all the updates that we have on the car, so there's a good chance the car will go backwards. It also depends, though, whether our rivals also go backwards, because we're all running under the same time constraints. Whew. Let's have a see here. Not really enough points, but that's what I get for being lazy and not doing the practice sessions myself. I think we will do in Season 2. It's just for Season 1, I think all of us, everyone who's been dropping in on the streams all week has been keen to see what happens when the grid gets shaken up a bit, so we have to blast through, put some time behind us. And despite the fact that we've been half-arsing the development of the car, it's actually gone surprisingly well. We'll dive straight into quali. No messing. I'm just going to take a moment though to spend some of those R&D points, try and keep the car somewhat competitive.
We could go for something like this.
Okay, we've now future-proofed our powertrain upgrades. Aero wasn't affected. We've got one more chassis upgrade to protect, and then we can start hopefully making some forward progress again. Gearbox looks fine. How are we in terms of power unit components, though? Not as bad as I feared, actually. We're currently winning a rivalry against Carlos Sainz, which I don't think anybody saw coming. 2 races remaining, and with 2 points clear. Let's see if we can make that last. I mean, he's almost certainly going to have the better of us in Abu Dhabi because it's a track that I'm bad at anyway, and I don't think it will suit the car very well, particularly Sector 3, which is very narrow and windy, round onto the start-finish straight. That said, though, I just saw we have a heavy rain situation here in Brazil, and the rain has been very kind to us, so let's immediately go and put a lap in the bank because you never know what's going to happen. also give us a good idea of early indicative pace. They still haven't finished fixing the problems with this game though. My sponsors have disappeared off the car again. And off my gloves. Oh wow. That is our first spin. It's taken us 21 rounds to have a spin like that. Oh. I wonder why that happened. I know why. It's because I turned off everything. And I was driving it like I hadn't. It's because I've been getting ready to stream with the wheel, and with the wheel it's a lot easier to manage things like no traction control. So I was having a wee bit of a dabble. Giovinazzi goes P1 provisionally, but obviously that won't last. Got an Alpha Tauri in front of us. That does seem to be slower, but I don't think it's going to ruin this lap. So I don't really care. Lance Stroll, now your provisional pole sitter. And now I'm your provisional pick up a penguin pole sitter. That lap didn't feel particularly great. And I don't know how fast it actually was. Let's take a look on the old timing board. Yeah, we're already down to third, but actually it's not that bad. We're only a tenth off Valtteri Bottas and we're faster than Max Verstappen. So it looks like my prediction that this may go the way the USA did looks about right. Looks about right. Let's jog time on. Yeah, the track's rubbering in, people putting in faster times. We may not even need to go out again, to be honest, looking at the times that we've done. But I will, just to be safe. And we've got the tyres, may as well use them. Of course, it doesn't really matter as well how hard we push to get into Q3 because we will be starting on full wet tyre. We already know from the forecast, assuming the forecast is correct. But I believe if it says it's going to be a rainy race, it will be. The variability comes in when it's a changeable condition race, and it's unclear how accurate the timeline for weather change is. It should be variable if the game's well designed enough, but yeah, the track is definitely rubbered in. We go purple in sector 1. Another silent quali lap because we're competitive. I can feel it. Kaboom! Word to your moms, we came to drop bombs. Look at that. car is suddenly very, very happy. Right, I think that's good enough to get us through. I don't know what you think. We'll jog time on some more. Oh, also our upgrade package came, so the car actually has an upgrade on it. Okay. Topped the timing charts in Q1. Brazil's always been very kind to me though. The sun is a bit lower in the sky. Immediately, not going to repeat the mistake I made in America, where I went out early in Q2, used my good tyres, and then the track rubbered in, and I ended up starting P18. No sir, don't make that mistake twice, at least not consecutively. I'm sure I'll make that mistake again very, very soon. Loosen up those shoulders.
To go.
A little bit conservative on the brakes there, but it does seem to pay off later in the sector, so I'm prepared to sacrifice a bit of time early in the lap to get it back by the end. I think that's something that's definitely more pronounced in this iteration of the game. Sometimes it really is a case of being slow somewhere to be fast generally. And it really does discourage you from pushing 110% on every single corner because it will actually slow you down. I'm just astounded by the pace this car has had. Here and in the USA, because I mean those results came on the back, let's not forget, of a run of non-points finishes that seemed to be more reflective of the car's true pace. And again, we've stopped messing with the difficulty now. We cranked the difficulty up 3 or 4 times, found a level that seemed to be correct, and then the car's just again outdone itself. I think we have the pace for a win here. It's mad, but again, sometimes you have anomalous races like that. I really did think we'd found a good difficulty level, and it's normal occasionally for a track to suit a driver and for the driver to outdrive the car, but maybe this gap is a little bit too big given that I'm top of the timing charts. But there we go. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Although I think it's perfectly fine to ask why someone's giving you a horse as a gift. To be fair though, I think I'd be more comfortable giving someone a horse than I would be giving them an Amazon Fire device. Last Christmas he kept trying to advertise to me, give your loved one a Fire tablet. And I thought, oh, the price is quite reasonable, and then I realised you're not really giving them a gift. Because everything they own, all their media, they have to buy again from Amazon to use it on the device. Oh, we're already off onto tangents. Right. 1 lap, make it count. But I think we could actually get pole, which is completely preposterous. And maybe it's also because all the sponsors have disappeared off the car. Thanks, graphics bugs. And because of that, maybe the weight saving from that amount of paint is enough to boost the car's performance to such a level. But honestly, anywhere in the top 10 is really good for this car, so if we don't get pole, I'm perfectly happy, because I think really this is the sort of pace that's going to deliver over race distance more than a single lap. I'm just hoping that the setup isn't too hard on the tyres, because usually if you get a car that normally doesn't qualify very well and you set it up in such a way that it starts flying around a single lap, then you're probably sacrificing a lot in terms of tyre wear, tyre temperatures and fuel usage. And I'm wondering actually if I maybe should put some more fuel on board the car, because you can undo it all as well. Overheating your tyres costs you a huge amount of time. I mean, the sort of time that you just can't claw back. And if you also have to run in lean engine mode for half the race because you're burning through your fuel, then really you've undone yourself just to get a good position in qualifying. And that's why actually most people who do share their setups clearly mark them when they're for time trial or for race, because obviously if you're going for a glory lap, then the time trial setups are going to be the ones you want, but I wouldn't run even 25% race distance with one of those. P2, I don't think we'll hold on to P2, but I don't care. I don't care. We've already outdone ourselves. We're in Q3. I think we've got a front row start. I think we have a front row start. Oh no, row 2.
Of our top 3, Hamilton, Leclerc and Williams. With qualifying complete,
wow, it's very close between the top 4 cars though. Who else has had a good run? Daniel Kvyat in the AlphaTauri, sticking at P9, that's a good run. Sainz has been really good in the second half of the season as well. Vettel and Verstappen not looking quite so racy. Daniel Ricciardo making it into Q3 pretty reliably at this point in the season. Not many surprising names dropping out then, which is a good sign, because if not too many people are qualifying out of position, then maybe it's true pace.
Your thoughts? It's been a great qualifying session for you. Are you going to carry that momentum into the race?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's quite a buzz around this team at the moment. What are your thoughts on them?
I'm trying not to give all the most egotistical replies, even though in my head I think it would be funnier and more accurate. Well, after a stretch of non-points finishes, we could be about to have back-to-back podium finishes if we play our cards right. Not all the sponsors have disappeared, but the main one has. Wet race, again, the car loves the wet. I'm faster in the wet than I am in changeable or dry conditions relative to other cars. I don't think we could ask for a better setup, to be honest. The car probably is going to be a little squirrely under acceleration. It is, mate, it is. To be honest though, it was right that Leclerc stuck his hand up and said that was entirely my fault and it was completely inappropriate. It's the kind of overtake I would attempt on the stream. It was clearly never going to come off, and I guess maybe frustration just getting the better of him. That said, they have an entirely new car for Hungary because they knew this car was so bad, so maybe they can turn the season around, although it'll have to be a huge step forward.
Okay, we had a fantastic result at the last race. Let's try it again here.
I'm going to treat this as a non-stop race because I've been burned before. If you watch the the last two races, I stopped to get a fresh set of inters, and even though that helped my pace, when the track dried up, I'd stopped unnecessarily. So I'm going to go as long as I can on these inters and hope that the track dries off enough for me to switch to slicks right at the end and gain through smart strategy. Very, very deadly light on the throttle. An overtake button already. Oof. We had an excellent start, so good we almost ran into the back of a Mercedes, which would have been funny until I had to deal with the consequences of no points. I think, actually, Leclerc and Sainz could be a super exciting lineup, and I'm really proud of Ferrari for changing their philosophy. I'm hoping that they can remember how to run a two-car team, and I know it sounds kind of a mean thing to say, but for so long that's kind of how the teams run, right? That there's always been sort of a clear number one, and that's why Kimi Raikkonen was being ritually sacrificed every Grand Prix by being left out on his tyres far too long. If they want to win the Constructors again, things have changed, right? Since the eras where they were at the most successful, and I'm hoping that they've learned enough now to adapt. I don't think they'll build two crappy cars back to back. I'm pretty sure they're well aware of how bad this car is, and I'm hoping already for a better showing in Hungary, because I think we need a strong Ferrari, whether you're a fan of them or not. They're such a legendary part of the sport, and you can't help but have affection for them, I think, and it's sad when they're not doing well. It's even sadder than I suppose seeing McLaren or Williams suffer as we have. I mean, no long-term F1 fan really wants to see Williams down at the back, even if they don't want to see them winning. And Ferrari, I think that goes even more so, because such a large percentage of F1's audience comes from the effect of Ferrari, which is why Ferrari, of course, get all these little special clauses in all the agreements. But I'm with you, man. I'm totally hyped for Ferrari next year. If they can deliver a car that is on pace with the cars around it, I think Leclerc and Sainz is one of, if not the most exciting lineup for next year. Super, super hyped for that. It'll be interesting to see how Ricciardo's arrival and McLaren shakes up that dynamic, though. Because the way Lando's driving at the moment, I do wonder if Danny Rick's coming into that team presuming he's going to be number one and the team's going to be built around him, only to get there and find that Norris has delivered on the results but also built a real rapport with the senior management of the team. I mean, the owners seem to like him, Zach Brown seems to like him, and he learned so much last year that he's applying this year. I tell you what, I'm curious as well to see how all these young drivers will fare when they're finally given the stage and they're in cars capable of racing each other. Ocon really impressed me in qualifying yesterday. I think the ability to extract that level of pace out of the Renault in the wet shows where he excels, and he just got very unlucky today with the serious reliability problems that team have, particularly with regards to overheating, which is something I don't think is going to get better anytime soon. We may end up seeing the Renaults just turning the power units down in an effort to try and make sure they finish races, but I felt bad for both of them actually, because Ricciardo had really strong pace as well, but it just evaporated as the car began to overheat. It's also very weird on its tyres, isn't it, that Renault? It's kind of the mirror of the McLaren somewhat, because what seems to be the case is the McLaren doesn't necessarily benefit immediately from fresh tyres, but then over time seems to activate them really well. And then with the Renault, they were extracting a crazy pace out of the mediums, only to find that the softs didn't work as well, and the mediums sort of fell off a cliff for them a little bit. The only thing that had disappointed me really, I suppose, aside from seeing the Ferraris take each other out, is that this race just had a lot of hype to live up to after last week, and clearly it was never going to pan out that way. A lot more cars finished, of course, because given the DNF rate last week, they probably figured out what they'd done wrong if it was a mechanical failure, and done their best to mitigate it. Also, the Mercedes didn't seem to have the gearbox problems again, although they weren't having to race as hard. Yeah, the McLaren, very, very strong on light fuel. I was curious to see if that would translate into a rainy qualifying session, but clearly it did. And I think it goes a long way actually in showing how strong that chassis is, now that they've separated from Honda and realised that the problems with the car were down to them and nothing to do with Honda. Because the Renault's not exactly a power unit to write home about, and look at the results they're pulling out of it now. I just hope that Ricciardo and Norris can keep up that momentum, and you have to say they're in a good position for the Mercedes changeover. Because I think once you stick a Mercedes power unit in the back of that McLaren, assuming it doesn't disturb the balance of the car too much and doesn't require too much radical repackaging, because honestly I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how different in configuration the Renault and Mercedes power units are, then it looks like a no-brainer that this is a team that's going to be up there with Red Bull certainly, if not a threat to Mercedes itself. They just have to, now they've found a rhythm, they just have to keep it. The biggest disruption aside from the engine change, of course, is Sainz leaving, which I think everybody could come to regret, but I hope it doesn't go that way. What did you make of George Russell? I felt really bad for him in the race. He had such a good quality. Yeah, I'd agree with you there. It's by no means a bad PU, it's just there does seem to be a distinction, sort of two-tier system, and you have Honda and Renault lagging behind just a little bit, but honestly the PUs generally seem to be increasingly close together. I mean, it's not like the Honda is holding Red Bull back necessarily. It was a mistake, the car got away from him. At first I thought maybe because the Haas is really bad on the brakes, right, and Magnussen is an aggressive attacker and an aggressive defender, and I sort of, the camera only joined Russell as he speared off into the gravel trap, and I thought, okay, well maybe he was forced wide or something happened because Magnussen got a bit too aggressive, but it sounds like he just dropped the car himself, made a mistake. Prior to that though, his pace looked pretty good, and it seems like he damaged his floor by going off, because the car really seemed to struggle for pace after that. He did get by Latifi in the end, but yeah, worrying. I was quite pleased to be vindicated though, because on the stream yesterday before qualifying went live, I actually made the prediction that the Williams looked like a car that would do quite well in the rain, and the reason I said that was, yes, it's not the most agile and certainly not the most competitive chassis in the dry, but if you look at the number of cars in the field at the moment that are genuinely fast, but they seem very twitchy, particularly if you watch free practice. The Red Bull springs to mind, the Ferrari too. Whereas the Williams seems very planted. I mean, it's obviously not super fast, but it seems to be very consistent in power delivery. It seems a decently balanced car, and it seems to be able to hold a racing line. And if you have that, then you should be able to extract more pace than the other guy in the wet, and that seemed to be true. Latifi I felt bad for as well, because he did look to have the pace to join his teammate in Q2. His lap was fast enough up until Sector 3, and then he had to slow for the double yellows. If he'd been able to finish that lap and he hadn't made a mistake, he would have been in Q2, so a bit of hard luck for him. Yeah, I think you can make the argument occasionally Magnussen crosses over into dangerous. I guess I cut him a bit of slack because he's had such a difficult start to his career. If you remember his season at McLaren, he did really, really well, podium on his debut. He also pulled a good haul of points in the race after, despite the car burning him. There was a wiring fault in the car, and he was being burned by something overheating. He actually got a scar from it, I believe. But then, the Alonso show rolled into town, and Honda have a special affection for Jenson Button, and he's very popular in Japan. So Honda threw their weight around, and obviously Magnussen was out on his ear. And then I don't think he did a terrible job at Renault, but it wasn't enough to hold on to. So getting to Haas and being up against Grosjean, who at that point hadn't started dropping the ball as frequently as he had. There was a time where Grosjean was super popular within Haas, so he was coming into a team where the team seemed to be built around another driver, and he was at the last chance saloon. Because if it didn't work out for him at Haas, then he was probably out of the sport. And I guess you've got two choices at that point. Either you go in and you make your mark, or you very meekly defer to the de facto number one driver and hope that when the time comes to sign contracts, you've done a good enough job to hold on to your seat, even if you've not really been at the sharp end of your own talent. Then, over the course of that first season together, the view of the team seemed to shift, right? And all of a sudden, the garage was rallying around Magnussen, and you saw that in Drive to Survive, where they had the Haas team dinner, and they didn't even invite Grosjean, which, I'll be honest, cracked me up. It still tickles me a little bit to think of it now. Where Magnussen goes next is anyone's guess, though, because I don't think Haas will stay in the sport after 2021. Do you know, I completely agree with you, but actually, Simon, the guy who hosts the podcast with me, he knows a few people inside Haas, and my presumption was always that he had, secret nude photographs of Gunther Steiner that he was using as blackmail leverage. But the reason he saved his seat in the end is that he was the only person who could see the team was developing the car in the wrong direction. And if you remember, they ended up going back to Melbourne spec, and suddenly he was getting better results again. And he'd been telling them all the way through, the developments you're putting on the car are making it worse. They did make it worse. And when it came to the end of the season and they had to decide where do we go from here, even though Grosjean had had two really terrible seasons, he'd kind of been vindicated, and he'd seen something they'd had a blind spot to. So I guess they decided, well, maybe we keep him around just at least another year so we don't fall into the same trap. The problem is it's a wasted exercise now, because Gene Haas seems 1 foot out of the door of F1 already. I always thought the Haas experiment wouldn't run very long, because when he came into the sport, the way he was talking kind of implied he didn't really understand what he was getting into. And I do respect him as a businessman and a race team owner, but because F1's so disconnected from the rest of motorsport in a sense, in terms of the engineering, he just seemed kind of naive, and he was talking in terms of expecting to be able to buy a car essentially off the shelf and then be challenging for points and podiums with it, which has never been how F1 works. And then when inevitably they had to develop a car that started out strong. They didn't really understand the car, and that's still true today, which is why they're still having brake problems despite buying brakes from a very reputable manufacturer that other teams use without issue. Because when they first started having the brake problems, which I think was 2017, they initially blamed the manufacturer of discs for the discs exploding, and they changed to another manufacturer, and then the problems continued. So the issue is definitely in their understanding of the car. And this year they've been told by Gene Haas, the team has to turn a profit if we're going to stay in Formula 1. Now, Formula 1 teams making a profit is pretty rare generally anyway if they're going to be competitive. It can be done. You can make a profit out of an F1 team, but if you're pushing your way up the grid, you should be breaking even or running at a deficit and relying on investment. The only way they can turn a profit is to, first of all, sign more sponsors, cut down on driver salaries, and not develop the car. So they've already committed to not developing their car. Given that the car at the moment is on similar pace to the Williams, and Williams are developing their car, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Well, yes, they did technically design parts of their own car, but when you're buying, particularly they buy the suspension, the rear suspension at least, off Ferrari, then you're always working within someone else's confines, right? Whatever you design has to work around components designed for someone else's platform, so it's always a bit of a toss-up. It's always sad that Pedro Diniz is not around, mate. It's always a shame that there's no Pedro Diniz. Him and his supermarket money and his dairy products money, he'd sort Haas out in a heartbeat. Do you know, people think my love of Pedro Diniz is like some kind of ironic joke, but actually I did really, really like Pedro Diniz because he was... I mean, all drivers come with sponsorship to a certain extent. By some definition, most drivers are paid drivers because sometimes sponsors choose to sponsor a driver rather than a team, and then that sponsorship money goes into the team's budget for the contracts with the driver. So, you know, even Ayrton Senna, by some loose definition, was a paid driver because of Banco de Brazil, for example. But if we consider a paid driver to be someone who wouldn't be there if it wasn't for money, then I would make the argument that Pedro Diniz is the greatest paid driver of all time, because even though he wasn't setting the timing boards alight, he was consistently improving, and he was a safe pair of hands. He was a guy who would always get the car home and often could do so in the points. To have a driver like that in a midfield team, plus all the money that was coming with him, like, no brainer. I'd have him all day, every day.
There's 5 laps of fuel remaining.
It's the sort of paid driver you dream of when you realise you have to take a paid driver. Yeah, precisely. I mean, very, very few families are wealthy enough to put their own children to top tier motorsport. I mean, of course, Max Verstappen and Kimi Räikkönen's son and the Schumacher boys, like, they will definitely have an easier time of it because they come from wealthy and racing families. But yeah, the majority of drivers, no, they don't. They really don't. And that's why I enjoyed actually Drive to Survive, spending as much time as they did talking to Esteban Ocon, because I know Hamilton's a working class hero because, you know, his dad basically bankrupted himself for his son's racing career, and he wouldn't have got there if it hadn't been for Ron Dennis and McLaren supporting his career. Ocon's very much out of the same mould. His dad's a mechanic or an electrician, I think, and, you know, they were like selling the family car to send him karting and stuff, and when that comes good, I think it just makes everything taste sweeter. it's a lot easier to like a driver who's come up that way. Mark Webber is another good example, actually. You know, leaving home at 18, running away to Europe with no money in your pocket, except the bare minimum budget to get you into a race seat. Hey Watch, how you doing, mate? Did you enjoy the Grand Prix? We were just talking about pay drivers and why Pedro Diniz is so good. How are my tyre temperatures? I've got a feeling there's still water coming off the front tyres, so it's probably a bit... Yeah, I don't think it's worth stopping for dries. I really thought that it would be, based on the weather forecast, but again, wet weather has served us well. As you've probably seen by now, Watch, and anyone else who's joined, we have somehow found ourselves in a position where we're about to win a race. This car is sensational on this kind of circuit, and particularly in the wet. No one can touch us. I turned the difficulty up even more, but in the dry races and on more technical circuits, that, you know, particularly street circuits, the car has no pace, and we're already struggling to make 17th or 18th. So at this point, having now done nearly a full season, I could tweak it more, but I'm prepared at this point to make the call that Codemasters really need to fix it with a patch. Because I think the differential is just too big. And I don't think you should get variability. Yeah, they do seem to. They seem to really slow down. I was hoping patch 1.04, that was the launch day patch for the... No one's pitted, and apparently that's suddenly not a problem. I learned this in my driver career mode that I'm doing off stream, because I was under the presumption that you had to pit, like at least one pit stop was mandatory. Oh, sorry.
Okay, some information on signs. They have an issue with their car. They're going to be slow.
I was under the impression that you had to stop, but I lost places stopping when no one else did, and no one got penalties for not stopping. So this has turned into an absolutely dominant win that we will not repeat in Abu Dhabi because I'm terrible at it. Tell you what though, it makes Mick Schumacher look like a total dick, doesn't it?
This is your final lap of the race. Okay, clear.
Are you having fun with 2017, mate? I think out of the recent years, that's probably the best one to get. Aside from this one, of course, but I think it's perfectly reasonable to wait for this one to go on sale. You know, we were talking about the Grand Prix. I didn't even mention Lando Norris. The boy comes good, eh? That was a sensational final lap. I'm loving McLaren this year. I really am. It's making me happy. That's why I deliberately chose to wear my McLaren shirt on stream. Yeah, you're right there. You are right.
You worked hard for that one. Congratulations.
I didn't work hard at all, actually, Jeff. I don't even know how it happened. Driver of the day, though, Esteban Ocon. You think it should be me?
Celebrations begin, and well earned they are indeed. It may have looked simple at times, but as any racing driver
we win, but Lewis Hamilton is our Drivers' World Champion. It's gone down to the wire, which is surprising, but then I realised that it's quite close between him and Bottas, but Mercedes have totally run away with it. Who's that supposed to be? Because it obviously isn't me. Does anyone know who that's supposed to be? He looks a bit like Mr. Burns brought to life.
I feel like consistency was probably the key today. There's being quick, and then there's being quick lap after lap after lap. If you can do that,
do you know, Jeff has a face that pops up on the first round of the season. I didn't check what he looked like because Jeff's sort of becoming irrelevant to me. He's like background noise now. I don't know why some of our sponsors keep turning invisible. But there we go. Our first ever win as our own constructor. Yeah, sorry, I meant to come back to you on that watch, but Daz is completely right. 2017 didn't find the right balance, in my opinion, for moving between teams, and you would always get screwed over by car development. Well, look at that, we've unlocked some white gloves, which should contain our excitement.
Amazing talents out on the track today. But Anthony, who would you pick as your driver of the day?
Well, my driver of the day has to be Charles Leclerc. He stopped out on the track today, even through the competition.
Oh, take them to the Burns unit.
Mercedes as they managed to secure the constructors' title. An incredible performance.
So that puts us a stupendous P7 in the Drivers' Championship. And we're up to P5 in the Constructors. This is insane. Given how completely up and down our season has been, I would not have predicted it to go this way. I really thought Renault had us. And I would have put us, at best, at the start of the season, at best, P7 in the Constructors was the best I would hope for. I came into the season hoping for P10, but I hadn't played the game before, and we produced a better car than I predicted through the questions Will Buxton asked us at the start of the season. So we ended up with a really good chassis, and that meant in the first 3 Grand Prix we actually really did quite well. But then we had a huge mid-season slump. Mad. Completely mad. I'm super happy with that though. It feels less satisfying than the P2 we got yesterday though. It should though give us enough. Oh, hold on.
Fans really seem to enjoy that. It made it look easy.
Not as much as I enjoyed it, love.
You took the top points today. Was it a comfortable win?
It really was. I'm not going to pretend to be modest.
Did you have the wrong fuel strategy today, or was it your management?
I think it was a perfect fuel strategy, given that I ran out of fuel about 10 metres before the finish line, and I had a 4.5 second clearance of the car behind. But I'll take the blame.
Well, looks like your luck has changed. Things went a lot better than last weekend, didn't they?
No. No, they didn't. I'm going to give the chassis guys some love because I want to keep building on the chassis. You underestimated the team. The team's come big. So 1 round left to go, guys. A lot of open questions for us. First question. Given that we dropped Jordan King mid-season, even though on paper his stats were developing really quick, and we took Mick Schumacher to test our tinfoil hat-wearing theory that because his name was Schumacher, he would prove to be OP. Compared to Jordan King, he has been getting better results, so there was some truth to that. But now we're coming to the end of the season, and the question is, given we have a car that's occasionally capable of not just points, but podiums, do we now start saving money and hire a more experienced, higher rated F1 driver that can achieve results similar to us? Or do we keep Mick Schumacher and develop him into the next season and see if my theory that driver performance changes only apply every half season? Previous experience with these games has told me that and you will see this actually in F1 2018 and 19, you'll develop your car, but your teammate will still be driving as if the car had its initial stats, and then at a certain point, usually the end of the season, the cars will actually start driving at the level they should have done, because I was burned several times. I had a really good season at Alfa Romeo Sauber, but left because I thought, well, we're never going to win or challenge for the Constructors' Championship because driver moves weren't possible the game before last, and Ericsson just wasn't scoring points, even though the car was capable of it. So I left Alfa Romeo, and then suddenly Merrixon's in the points consistently because he's driving with the same car I was. And I get the feeling the same thing might happen here. That's why I was a little reluctant to drop Jordan King when we did. Let's go take a look. To be fair, I've got a special fondness for the F2004. Also, though, the early 90s Ferraris I really like. They should have aged really badly. Like, the shape of the chassis should look ugly, but it doesn't. It just really dings my bell. Right, let's take a look then. So Mick Schumacher's gone from 61 to 63. Jordan King, on the converse, he went from 65 to 75. What bothers me is that Mick Schumacher's wages have gone up hugely. Because when we signed Mick Schumacher, his salary was 1 million. It's gone up to 2.5 million. Even Jordan King's didn't go up that much. If we look at the driver market, see, partly I was thinking, if we were going for a realistic playthrough, because we're tied to Honda, I was going to stick Nobuharu Matsushita in the second car. He's higher rated than Mick Schumacher and 500,000 cheaper. He's got an average rating of 67. Of course, there's sub ratings for different stats there that add some variation. Nick de Vries, 2.5 million, he's 71 ranked. Jordan King, by being out of his race seat, has dropped down to 66, but his market value has stayed at 3 million. Jack Aitken, 69 average, 2 million. Antoine Hubert, 67 average rating, 2 million. We've got Callum Illott, 63 rating, 2 million. Luca Giotto, 64, 2 million. The other alternative that we were talking about, and originally when I came into this game I wanted to hire Giuliano Alesi because I was a big fan of his dad, particularly during his Ferrari years. But at the time he wasn't interested in joining us. The other experiment we were thinking of was signing Tatiana Calderon, because again the theory was that if Schumacher was OP, would they make Calderon OP as well to encourage drivers to use the only female driver on the roster? Yeah, it's tricky. See, what I'm trying to figure out, Wodge, and you're right, I wouldn't put it past Codemasters for these numbers to say one thing, but the true figures behind it to be different. But we've got one more race to think about it, so you guys have a think, and between us, I'm sure we can figure out what we want to do. If we were looking at current F1 drivers, I think they're all a bit out of our budget, at least for this season. So if we take a cheaper driver, we can invest in our factory some more. In terms of customization, let's see why sponsors aren't appearing on our livery. Yep, the game just decided that it wasn't going to have them there anymore. Actually, no, Avolo was here. This is what annoys me as well. This game has some fairly unforgivable bugs that keep rearing their head, and they seem super easy to fix. Yeah, there we go. That's what our chassis should have looked like at the last Grand Prix. Right. I'm not going to change power unit components. We've already taken penalties to make sure we have a good power unit for the last Grand Prix of the season. The gearbox, the wear rate on the gearbox has been fine, even though we haven't really invested in durability. I think that's another balance tweak that Codemasters need to make. We have just enough points to safeguard the last of our developments. There's a formula change for next year, so that's why I'm keen to finish this next race, see how the grid shakes up, see what drivers move, see which teams end up in a good position. We are inevitably going to go backwards because we can't save the durability upgrades that we've already got, but in terms of the performance of the car at least, we should be in a fairly good position. I don't think we'll unlock any more upgrades now, but never say never. 7.69 million in the bank. I'm not sure really if I'm going to spend any money now or wait till the off season and see how much we've got to play with for driver salaries, and also we don't know what happens in the off season. If you remember, there was a mid-season break that I wasn't expecting, and that gave you some options to do certain things. So let's fill up our time. Again, definitely makes sense to invest in our second driver, so we'll give him some simulator time. Morale boost for all our departments. I haven't done this all year, but we've got the money, and I think they've earned it. That gives us 4 days left. So either we go for a chassis department focus, but I don't like doing the focus because it damages the morale of the other departments. So it's kind of like you pick a guy out in a meeting and go, this guy, love him, he's ace. You guys, pieces of shit, but this boy, oh yeah. So we're not going to do that. We'll do title sponsor venue opening because that improves our acclaim. And we'll do driver promotion filming, and that also improves our own acclaim, not the other guys. It's becoming an exercise in egoism, this team. But it's my name above the door, so, well, one of my names above the door, so. Have you seen the price of Freddos now? It's not like it was when I was a boy. When I was a boy, they were 10p for a Freddo. Have you seen the rate of inflation on those things? If they want Freddos, they can fucking earn them. Not a charity. That's how I run the team. I spend half my time being inappropriate, kind of like a Douglas Renham figure, and the other half sat in the staff room making sure only the correct staff members help themselves to the biscuits. I think it's good to have a clear hierarchy within the team. Right, here we go. Final Grand Prix of the year. Again, I'm going to skip practice because it bores the arse off everybody, including me. Codemasters, please add some variation to practice sessions. Just something. Shake it up a little bit. Add some more practice things that we need to do. Set some more dynamic goals. Something more interesting. And it's not that practice sessions aren't worth doing from a resource point standpoint, because they are. The balance is right there. Paying them in Freddos, man, it's a solid retirement fund, because looking at the inflation, they could sell those Freddos in the future and make a huge profit. It's like paying them in gold bars. No, 2 Freddos. That's ridiculous. You can find another teammate. 1 Freddo and we'll talk. Do you know what you bastards have done to me now, though? I want a Freddo. I lived in Germany for 10 years. I haven't had a Freddo in maybe 15 years. And now they're all I can think about. I'm very suggestible. You should Google it, mate. But it's essentially very tasty chocolate in the shape of an anthropomorphic frog. And at least when I was a kid, if you didn't have much pocket money left, it was like an easy win, because you got Cadbury's quality chocolate for 10p. That's mad. Like, you never got anything of that value. But they've just constantly raised the price. Maybe it's like a gateway drug, that they get you in cheap with the 10p Freddos, and then once you're hooked, they can charge whatever they want. You've never had a Freddo? Do you want a job in the Formula One team? That's the kind of guy you want in an interview. The sort of person who comes into an interview and you talk, you know, what are you looking for in terms of a bonus? And you just go, what's a bonus? You start on Monday. Okay, let's see where we fit in Abu Dhabi. Again, I'm going to try and lower expectations now. We've had 2 back-to-back insanely good races. I'm just not good at this track. Sector 1, it's very easy for me to lose time through the fast corners. It takes only a slight blip in concentration and you've lost quite a few tenths. Sector 3 is a lot of low-speed corners, very, very windy, which does not suit this car or me at all. And Sector 2 is about putting your power down, and we don't have great power.
When you're ready, let's go.
You may be wondering why I'm choosing to drive out instead of flying lap. The reason is I want to give myself a dry run for this to make sure I get my braking points right. I know what you're thinking, but Zero, whenever you stream, you always turn corner indicators on because your brain isn't capable of thinking that fast while talking and reading chat. And you'd be right, but Codemasters are a sneaky bunch, and if you actually drive to exactly where the braking markers tell you, you'll be slower than you need to. So you always need to brake before or after where it tells you to get the optimal pace. Oh, Grosjean theory, this is going to be good. Go on. I can't read it yet. I'm paying attention, but I'll come back to you. I will speculate on what it might be, though. Like, he's a special robot sent from the future, designed to destroy Formula One from within, to prevent some kind of future carbon fibre-based apocalypse. Or Contract Killer, sent here again from the future to destroy all brake discs. I mean, that's the strongest theory as any. Although it doesn't explain why he released a cookbook. The thing is, like, Grosjean's become sort of a figure of fun for me and a lot of people who watch F1, and certainly on the Failcast F1 podcast, where I regularly say very mean things about him that I would never say to anyone, really, but I think he can take it and he wouldn't see it anyway. I don't think Grosjean really is a truly terrible driver. I think you look at his stint at Lotus and you could see that there was something there. But he has made a lot of stupid mistakes. I think he's become quite frustrated, and he saw a psychologist for a while, a sports psychologist, which sounds like a made-up job, but it's a real thing. And while he was doing that, he actually started to come good again, but then he kind of lost it. So I think part of the problem is he gets into his own head a little bit, and then starts making stupid mistakes. And then also, I can't honestly say that Haas totally escape any blame for some of the more embarrassing accidents he's had, because the car just seems like a death trap. I mean, the Austrian Grand Prix, the weekend before this one, the way the brakes went, the sort of sudden snap, is really, really bad. Of course, they didn't have the same problem to the same extent this week. Maybe the drivers were just taking it easier, I don't know. Although Grosjean did have brake problems partway through the race. If you remember, he had that
is the fastest
rather weird lockup. And again, it was on his front right, where he seems to have the bulk of his problems. I was about to do another lap there, completely unnecessarily. It's almost like I don't want the season to end. So, I'm in a strange position now of not wanting to see him in another car, because I think it's time he move over and make room for someone else. And yet also being curious what would happen if he was in another car that didn't suffer from the same quirks and reliability issues and occasional balance problems. It's a super temperamental machine, very diva-like, and more so than other cars that have had the same characteristics. An example I can think of one, but I mean it wasn't a car that regularly tried to kill its own drivers. Do you remember the Mercedes of, was it 13 or 14? The one that would always go super well in qualifying, but then as soon as the race started would just go backwards. It would like moonwalk to the moonwalk its way out of the points, because it was super good for one lap, and then it taken too much out. It's got sort of a similar quality to it, except that you don't know when that quality is going to hit. So I had a sloppy sector 1 there, which you'll probably have noticed, but I do struggle with sectors 1 and 3 here in particular. There's just some really awkward corners here. It's not even that I'm going to say it's a bad track or anything, it's just there's corners that to me just feel very awkward, and it seems to be a failing of mine rather than anything else, because it's been like this in every version of the game that I've played, and no matter which car I'm in, that it's just a circuit where I've always struggled to be clean. But apparently we set a purple sector 2, so it's up to me to now completely balls it in sector 3, which you know I will. But we look like we're on the bubble for Q2 at least. Also, it's very hard to get off the curbs, I find, in those last 2 corners, and it costs you quite a bit of time. Nothing kills your pace in this game on a quali lap, I find, than staying on the wrong curbs too long, or touching them at all, actually.
Our best lap so far is a 1:30.
Where does that put us? It's annoying that it doesn't give you the screen beforehand. P11, that's better than I thought it was going to be. Mick Schumacher only good enough for 19th, beating Grosjean, obviously, and the Williams. Anyone surprising up at the sharp end? No, not really. I mean, Perez, Ricciardo and Sainz have all been strong in the second half of the season, and it's business as usual above them. Albon down in 9th is a bit off the pace, but I'm pretty sure he'll find some time in Q2. I'm going to go out on the softs because it's a win-win. Either I make it into Q3 or I don't, and I've got free choice of tyres anyway, and I can run a contra strategy which has worked about 50% of the time. It's a good plan because 50% of the time it works every time. Oh, Albon on provisional pole. It looks like he heard me mocking him and decided to slap me in the face. Oh, and again, because you will have missed this at the start, this is a last stream that will look like this. Yay! We're going professional for the Failcast and for this stream as well. 4K camera, stream deck, capture card, fancy graphics, transitions, the whole works. I've been doing YouTube now for years, and I've been doing Twitch for 3, and it's about time we started doing it properly. It's about time. So I finally bit in the bullet, and I will be upgrading to PS5 when it comes out. Simon wasn't sure he was going to, actually, and I thought that could cause real problems for the podcast, but he's changed his mind now because there's some anime-looking launch titles that sold him on it. I love night races. Right, place your bets. What do you reckon? What do you reckon? Are we fast enough to get out of Q2? I'm doubting it. I am doubting it. Press X to doubt. I've been whinging at Codemasters for most of this stream because of fairly minor bugs. It still has been the most stable release in all the 10 years I've been buying these games, and they do a very good job of particularly the nighttime circuits looking really, really good. More so in photo mode, if I'm honest, but you can get some really beautiful looking images out of this game. Yeah, that felt slow while I was doing it. P15 at best. So this, again, we've not changed the difficulty. It tells me that Codemasters just need to tweak some of the balancing a little bit, or that I'm truly awful at this track. Both of those are completely viable explanations. Max Verstappen fastest in Q2. We won't find out who our pole sitter is until we proceed to the race. In the end, we were about half a tenth off the back of Esteban Ocon's Renault. But Ricciardo, strong pace, up in P4 so far. If he can get a good points haul, and if Ocon getting the points as well, then we may still be under threat in the constructors from Renault. But in some sense, that would just be universal balance restoring itself. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, mate. That's exactly what I'm thinking, that they just need to refine the balance. The thing is, though, this game has been in the hands of the really big, successful YouTubers and streamers for weeks in some cases. Like, not the full build, but they've been able to try out races and circuits, and then they've had the full version of the game for about a week before the Schumacher edition released. And they're talking to these people fairly regularly. I'm surprised that these YouTubers and streamers didn't give them that feedback. But I guess maybe it's a deeper issue, because when they released the driver performance fix after the first Grand Prix, basically there's some underlying numbers that dictate how fast the drivers are, and they tweak those. But I don't think it's circuit specific, it's just a general number. So I guess there's probably something more complicated that has to be fixed to even out their performance across circuits, so it's a little bit more representative.
Tough luck there. It's not quite where we'd want to be on the grid, but chin up, it's not the end of the world.
No, it's not, but you can see it from there, much like Blackpool. That's a proper dad joke, because my dad used to joke like that. Have to go to Blackpool. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. Or, what was the other one? Going to Blackpool. It's not the end of the world, but it's in the same postal code. Okay, so ideally I want to come home ahead of Ocon to make sure that if only one of us gets points, it's me and not him. And also we're in a rivalry with Sainz, and we have to try and race him even though he's a completely unrealistic target.
Controversies and rivalries lies in our wake. And just one challenge remains here in the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah, that's true. To be honest, when you have like really niche. Oh, hey Apaya, how you doing? You missed a win, mate. You missed a surprise win out of nowhere. It was rainy in Brazil, and just like in the rain in Mexico, it just worked in our favour.
Fiat and Sergio Perez, Norris, Stroll, Esteban Ocon, Williams, Magnussen, Raikkonen, Mick Schumacher, and Roman Grosjean. Gasly, they've taken a grid penalty.
That's why we're starting higher up. Gasly's got a penalty, and so does Giovinazzi in the Alfa Romeo. Okay, well that's two cars that have more pace than us that are behind us, but they should be in traffic. So, clean start. I've not flashbacked this whole stream. Now Apaya's here, maybe I will. If Beetlejuice turns up, I definitely will, because there's something about him being on stream that makes me totally incompetent. But hoping for a clean start, gain a few places if I can into T1, and then just try and hold position as best as I'm able. I'm going to edit strategy and start on the harder of the two tyres. Because I think it's better for us to go long and finish light on the faster tyre. Yeah, it was. Although to be fair, I've always been quite good in Codemasters games in the wet. It's sorry. There you go, first flashback. But that was because I wasn't paying attention, and I steered into Ricardo and he nudged me round, and I was being incompetent because I was trying to answer chat. If it's before T1, it doesn't count. That's the rule. Again, Norris moves to close me off. And I was on the curb, so I had to do that to avoid a collision. He kind of turned in towards the centre of the track again, and it scared me. It made me afraid. Yeah, sorry, what was I going to say? I'd always been quite good in the wet in Codemasters games, but there was something about 2019 that completely killed that, and I was super slow. But the AI as well was so much more lively in that version of the game that the effect, I think, was multiplied. Bye, Bollard. There's no space for you here. The question I have though is I wonder what drove them to turn back to the other wet weather driving model, because as I understood it, most people kind of liked it. They preferred it. The car didn't twitch and spin as much as it does now, but it would just spin its wheels and not put down power, and that was what really screwed me, because I'd lose all my ability to accelerate out of the corner. And I always blamed it on the PS4 pad not having a lot of throttle travel, so you don't really get a lot of fine control. But I think that was just a cop-out. It was just bad, and sorry, I was just bad, and it didn't suit me. But you know the saying, a bad workman always blames his tools, and my tools are shit. Now, we've got a Magnussen behind us, so fiery death remains a possibility. Keep your eyes peeled. Yeah, losing a lot of time there. Again, it's the same problem that we saw in in Silverstone, for example, the car just, even when I'm off throttle, the car just doesn't seem to like to hold the line. I guess really that's something that could be dialed out by messing with the diff, but I'm only doing manual setups in my offline playthrough, so you guys don't have to sit through the hours and hours it takes of me running full-length practice sessions to figure out a setup that I like and that doesn't totally kill the tyres. I lead a very boring life. It's all practice sessions and Pedro Diniz anecdotes. What did you guys make of Stroll's performance today? I felt really bad for Perez. I voted for him driver of the day because I thought, honestly, he'd earned it. But I voted before the final lap, and Norris, with his power gamer moves at the end, also arguably did a great job. But Stroll is proving very interesting for me to watch this year. He got a DNF last time. This time I thought he had genuinely quite a good race, and his racecraft seemed okay. He'd always been someone that I wanted to see given a try in a faster car, because I know people tear him to pieces because of his dad and the money, and obviously we only really saw him in a Williams before, which wasn't a car that shows off the best a driver can do. But his junior Formula record was quite good, and money or not, you still have to have the talent to pull that off. And of course, you know, he did get the Williams on the podium in Baku, but we never really got much chance to glimpse him racing wheel to wheel outside of his rookie season. In his rookie season, going wheel to wheel just meant he crashed.
Engine is looking a little worn. Power output will be less than optimal.
Yeah, well, he has a photocopy of a World Championship winning car, but that does seem to be the case, doesn't it? But it's kind of the Haas problem manifesting itself again, right? Because the Mercedes was never that bad in the wet. Yeah, I think he just wanted it too badly by that point, didn't he? And I can kind of get that. When you're on a roll, you've been having a really strong Grand Prix, and you can see a really great result dangling itself in front of you, it probably drives you to push a little bit harder than you would otherwise do, and desperation moves may come into play. Oh no, definitely not, but my view was that he'd make a solid number 2 driver at a bigger team. It's just a case of whether he'd get the chance, and now he has got the chance. I think he's a pretty good number 2 for Perez. It's part of the reason I don't put too much credence in the rumour doing the rounds that his dad's going to send him back to Williams, having bought shares in Williams again, so he can hire Vettel for Aston Martin. I just don't see that happening. There's an interview coming up, actually, Martin Brundle interviewing Sebastian Vettel, and during the race today he said, oh, there's a rumour that in this interview Vettel's going to announce his retirement, but that's nonsense, we're just having a chat. And I was thinking, be careful what words you pick there, Martin, because you don't know, maybe he is going to surprise you and just announce his retirement, because I don't know where he's going to go. The only team that's even passably in the sort of area of the field he may be deigned to drive in is Racing Point, Aston Martin, Badger, Force, Eyebrow, Stroll, Jordan. But, I mean, the seats there are technically completely sewn up. There's no space for him unless they, you know, pull some strings. No, absolutely not. Before Danny Rick signed for McLaren, people were suggesting he might go there, but it was something that felt so wrong that I couldn't even imagine it. Like, I tried to imagine what he'd look like as a McLaren driver, and you know, he's a good driver. McLaren are a good team. There's no reason why he couldn't sign a contract, turn up there and drive. But you know, when something entirely feasible just feels somehow unrealistic, or at least a very bad match. It just struck me like that. It struck me as a relationship that wouldn't work out. I know he spoke to Red Bull, but I don't think he honestly believed he'd be allowed back there, because I think even if they decided they wanted to ditch Albon, and even though they've only got Gasly and Kvyat to choose from, I honestly think they're too proud to ever go back. As a matter of principle, they would just promote one of their young drivers again. And I honestly think it would be Kvyat who got the nod. Yeah, it pains me to say it, right? Because for me, it would be a great feel-good story. I think Ricciardo would make a very good world champion as an ambassador for the sport. It's why I like Jenson Button as a world champion, right? Because if you're trying to have a role model for kids, Jenson Button's like a true gentleman racer, and I thought he was a great role model to have as world champion. I think Ricciardo could have been a very good marketing world champion. It would have been a good feel-good story. But you're right. I think he's almost there, but he just falls short. I know, you know, he was beating Max when they were together across the season. That is, not necessarily on a single race basis. But you know, that was before the Max we have today, who's sort of matured a bit and become a bit less hot-headed. So you know, Ricciardo was winning, and I said it at the time. He was winning purely by virtue of being a more rounded, complete driver. He's going to bring home points more frequently. So over the course of a season, he's going to come out ahead. Whereas Max was going to be the one who delivered the big result and then 3 DNFs. Now Max is in a much more calm, level-headed place, and he's found the sweet spot for that aggression that he's always had. I don't think Ricciardo could touch him, sadly. Whereas Sainz, I think, in the right team that supports him the right way, I think he could. Yeah, I mean, Kvyat was fired in a very Daniel Abt kind of way, wasn't he? And they did it because they were just looking for an excuse to bump Verstappen as soon as possible, because at the time it was a known goal of theirs to make him the world's youngest world champion in the history of the sport. So the only way to achieve that goal was to find a way to get him into the main team as soon as feasible. No, I mean, don't get me wrong, when I was critical of Max, people always used to think, like me and Simon on the podcast, they always thought that we just disliked him. But I mean, I was a huge Jos Verstappen fan, and I was excited when Max came into the sport. The reason I was always so hard on Max Verstappen, and people thought maybe I hated him, was because I was frustrated, because I could see the driver that he was capable of being, but he was being too impatient. He was throwing away good results, chasing amazing results, and an F1 season is a marathon and not a sprint. And I was critical of him precisely because I knew how good he could ultimately go on to be. And in the end, you know, he had to have a really bad season where he kept dropping it, and it got so bad that even his boyfriend Christian Horner had to publicly say, if this carries on, we have to do something serious, for him to get the message. And then suddenly it was like someone flicked a switch, and he had an amazing second half of the season, and then for me last year he was driver of the season.
Mick is in the pits. Mick in the pits. to car in front is 9.2 seconds. Gap to teammate.
You're right about Sainz, Dazzy, and the thing is, another part of the reason we were always a bit hard on Verstappen is that the media was obsessed with him and was completely ignoring Carlos Sainz. And you might think that's understandable, but if you ask, like, particularly Max Verstappen fans, of course, but if you ask, like, the layman, who's the faster driver or who's more likely to win in a teammate head-to-head, almost everybody will say Max Verstappen. But actually, every season they were together, they were consistently the closest matched pairing on the grid. And it was like a cigarette paper between them, and it would switch who was on top over the course of the season. Yes, they're very different drivers, but I think they're both incredibly talented. I think Max has the edge in terms of absolute sheer raw pace, but I think Sainz makes up for that by being particularly measured and cool-headed when he needs to be. And people forget that can yield you just as many points as being able to fly around the circuit. Him moving to Ferrari, if Ferrari can get back to where they were, Sainz versus Verstappen, again, in cars of comparable race pace, that's very exciting to me. And I'm super keen to see how it pans out. And a good barometer as well will be seeing what happens with Sainz coming into what is now Charles Leclerc's team, ostensibly. Because I don't get the sense from Carlos, given he's had the career he has had, I'm not sure he's going to be prepared to lay down and be the Rubens Barrichello or the Eddie Irvine figure. I just don't think he's prepared to do it. So either he's going to have a very short Ferrari career or he's going to displace Leclerc. I don't see any middle ground solution. He's either going to go in there with designs of being a championship contender and be successful, or he's going to go in there and refuse to defer to Leclerc and either be fired for that or be fired for costing them points by racing his teammate in places where he's not supposed to, compromising strategies, things like that. It's a very all or nothing gamble for Sainz, and if I'd have been him, honestly, I would have stayed at McLaren, because that is the dream setup. It's a team that's going forward. The synergy between him and Lando is great. They've improved the all-round atmosphere inside the team, and they're going to take a massive step forward with Mercedes power, I think. But as we said at the start of the stream, when the Scuderia call, you pick up the phone. It's Ferrari. Like, if they offered you a contract and you said no matter how good your reasoning, there's always going to be a part of you that regrets it. So I totally understand why Sainz is going there. I'm 50-50 as to whether it's going to end up being the worst decision he's ever made. We will see. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, but Trulli was always an unconventional figure. Sensational qualifier, and then a guy who forgets to drive quickly when out on the racetrack. Amazing. Yeah, it does seem to be, doesn't it? What we need now is Minardi to make a comeback and Sainz to finish his career there, and we can have, like, you know, a mirrored end. Well, actually, not even for that reason. We just need Minardi to come back. I mean,
we have 5 laps of fuel remaining. It
was, but to be honest, he was in that Toyota at a time where it looked like it was about... I mean, I know the financial crisis caused the team to withdraw, but, you know, he was there, he had the car under him, and still, it always seemed so uneasy. Even when he had that great qualifying session, do you remember, weren't they on the front row, and somehow managed to balls that up as well. He's a driver I had a lot of love for, but yeah, precisely, and not only that, to be honest, it's that Giancarlo Minardi was around long enough to learn what he got wrong. And actually, there's a great book on Minardi called Forza Minardi that I would recommend to anybody. Giancarlo Minardi learned, first of all, that you know, he was someone who actually had dealings with Enzo Ferrari, and he was very much in the mould of Enzo Ferrari in the sense that he didn't have a great deal of respect for the British teams when he founded his team. And his big regret, he said, was never learning solid English, because it's part of what always held his team back. But you know, he knew how to run a backmarker team successfully. I know that sounds like a contradiction of terms, but he managed to find a balance between nurturing new talent and making money by, you know, selling their contracts out to bigger teams. He had a business model that worked, and his team was capable of producing some really good chassis that were always held back by his inability to negotiate for a good power unit, basically. Well, yeah, true. I mean, you're completely correct, but you know, by the 80s, the near total British stranglehold on F1 was pretty much complete anyway. I mean, Motorsport Valley was well established. Yeah, they did lack for money because, you know, they refused to take pay drivers for a long time, and I mean, Ayrton Senna, I believe, had dealings with Giancarlo Minardi and said that he was the only person who offered to pay him a salary. And he said he never forgot it.
There's 3 laps of fuel remaining.
And that's because Minardi always took the view that if you can help, like, go for talent first, find the fastest driver you can, pay him if you have to, and then the sponsors and the success will come, and you can just have a cut of future earnings. The problem was that when you fall into a certain level of financial precariousness, that you have to start taking pay drivers who then don't go on to deliver big. You're always playing catch up with yourself, and the fact that his team often had a solid chassis that was held back by a poor power unit just meant in the end it wasn't sustainable. Hello Beetlejuice, how are you, my friend? Expect a flashback any minute, because I've been super clean on this stream, and whenever you turn up it all goes to shit. Yeah, pretty wiped out myself, to be honest, mate. It's back to work tomorrow. I'm determined to finish this season this weekend, so obviously we're one lap from the end of the season. I'm going to do a quick look ahead to season 2 afterwards. It'll be a short stream today, and then I'm going to have to go and do adult things and gear myself up for the week. So yeah, dead tired. Didn't sleep very well last night or the 2 nights before, and yeah, it's been quite a hectic weekend. Pleasant, but hectic. Did you enjoy the race, though? No, it didn't, but I did some wheel testing by myself. I found a 20-minute window in my schedule to stick in the wheel and first of all check that it
This is your
worked,
final lap. Final lap of the race.
but also see how I would manage with it. So I did some laps in a Trident F2 car, no anti-lock brakes, no traction control. I could get the car round, but very, very, very slowly. It's going to take a long time before I can build up the confidence and the experience. I need to change some settings as well, because there's a lot of pedal travel, way more obviously than you get in the trigger of a PS4 pad. But I'd have to like
Lap of fuel remaining.
just touch the throttle, brush the throttle to get out of a corner without spinning, and then I'd slowly increase the power I was putting down. I mean, really incrementally. And once I got to about halfway depressed, it would still light up the rear tyres, and I'd break traction. So I don't know if that's still me doing something wrong and I should never be applying that much power, but the car was just very slow in a straight line because I was at half throttle. So I've got a lot to learn, but at some point I will be doing a totally inept stream where I'm learning to use my wheel. But I won't be using it in the Failcast podcast, I can tell you that much, because it requires even more brain power that I don't have. Still though, this, by the way, Beetlejuice, is the last stream that looks like this, the very last one. We've got a new setup for the Failcast and for my personal streams that I'll be finalising this week, but the graphics are all ready. We have fancy transitions and 4K face cam, a capture card, got my wheel, everything's set up. It's going to be mwah, chef's kiss. So apparently Ferrari got a surprise win there. They've had a really up and down season as well. It's the only team other than ourselves that have been so inconsistent between Grand Prix.
What set them apart from the rest?
Well, I think it was
Right then chat, it's decision time.
out on the track was today.
I talked you through the driver market situation before, and Beetlejuice, you'll be familiar with it already.
Saw that today with our winner.
What are your
Ferrari are at
thoughts?
it again, an excellent performance at today's Grand Prix.
We've got-
and there's certainly a team that
We
know
must
what
have
they're
like
doing.
over 8 million in the bank by the time this race finishes out. We could invest that in the factory and take a cheap driver. We could try and hire a driver with more F1 experience who's closer to me in terms of performance. Or do we keep Mick Schumacher for another season, or take Tatiana Calderon as a experimental guinea pig? Beetlejuice, you're in favour of renewing Mick or the Tata experiment. My vote was actually for Nobuharu Matsushita because he's cheaper, on paper better, and he fits the Honda theme.
Let's focus on the driver of the day.
Well, we've got a lot of options because I've saved up money.
Sebastian Vettel would definitely be my first choice. He showed up a lot of
Let's
the
see
drivers
how
out on
we
the track today.
finish the season,
Showed any
eh?
signs of slowing down.
So an incredible P7 in the drivers' standings. Really down to two exceptional races where we gained a shitload of points.
Fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you for the next one.
Then we have an astonishing, again, P5 in the Constructors. That seemed impossible 3 races ago because, yeah, Renault were on it, particularly with Ricciardo, but 2 podiums out of nowhere and suddenly we are P5. I have no idea how this affects us in the gap between seasons. This is the first time we've had a gap between seasons. The mid-season gap did something. Maybe the gap between seasons also does something. Shall we find out? Shall we take an adventure together? Let's go have a look. See what happens. But I imagine we have a lot of Freddo bars in the banks.
Amazing performance out there. I'm sure you're pretty happy with that.
Begone, foul wench. We want to move on.
Your team must be thrilled.
They really need to add more
What do you
questions.
think this team will be feeling after that result?
But I'd actually like stuff like that. We need like a Spygate. What I'd really like is an event where Ferrari steal from one of the engineers or bribe one of my engineers to get a blueprint of the car, copy it, and then end up 5 seconds off the pace. That would tickle me. I'd enjoy an event like that. Somehow as well, we've beaten Carlos Sainz, and that's again based entirely off those 2 podiums. The marketing level of the team has totally stagnated, aside from those 2 good results. We need to get to level 20. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All our sponsor contracts will be up in the off-season as well, so we will have... probably on the next stream we'll design a new livery. I've got a basic design for Season 2, but we've unlocked a lot more design since then, so maybe we can play around on the next stream and figure it out. What we're going to do now, though, is make a decision regarding sponsors and regarding drivers, and we're going to see what happens at the end of season. Exactly, and finally we're out from under the oppressive boot of our Chinese state sponsors. Right, let's go to the driver market. So Mick Schumacher has improved from a 61 average rating to 64, which is actually less than we got out of Jordan King. He's gone from a 1 million per season market value to 2.5 million per season. He now costs the same as Nick de Vries, who has a 71 rating. One of the options I had in mind was Nobuharu Matsushita because of the Honda power unit, kind of, you know, taking the Honda route. He's a 67 for 2 million. We have Luca Giotto, 64, so he's the weakest of the 2 million bracket, apart from Callum. Actually, no, there's a few that are at 2 million now. De Vries does look good, doesn't he? One more time. Giuliano Alesi, who was originally the driver I wanted, is a 63 for 1.5 million. So he's actually at quite a good price to skill ratio. And then we also have the immense Tatiana Calderon. And we talked on the last stream about hiring her for the same reasons that we hired Mick Schumacher, in that we figured the game would actually make them OP for perhaps political reasons. She's 1.5 million per season. Rated higher than Sean Gelael. By the way, this isn't me scrolling slowly through the driver menu here. Acclaim also affects how attractive you are to sponsors. So the higher the acclaim, the better sponsorship agreements you should get, because it takes your team acclaim, your driver acclaim, and your teammates' driver acclaim to sort of calculate a score. We have 10.15 million in the bank. Now, obviously, that's money that we could use to upgrade the factory, but we could also spend it on hiring a driver with F1 experience. We could technically afford the madman himself, Kevin Magnussen. George Russell as well. We could. George Russell was one that I was genuinely considering. He's a 77 rated driver, so pretty good. He's got an acclaim of 11, which is close to our level. And our car is definitely better than the Williams. So, yeah, what is everyone thinking? What are our thoughts? I mean, if we're looking in the 2.5 million bracket, there's only 2 drivers. Mick Schumacher, who we've already got, or Nick de Vries, same price, but he's much higher rated, although he's weaker on pace. So, Apaya votes de Vries or Magnussen. I guess Beetlejuice, you're still for Mick or Tatiana. Yeah, he's definitely a Mercedes driver of the future, and I think he proves it. So that's another vote for Russell. There's no agreement in chat. There's no democratic agreement. Come on, we need someone to step up. Mick or Nick. And 1 vote for Matashita. No retirees so far, but we won't know actually until we start a new season because the drivers only move around after us. Right, the only people who have got 2 votes are Mick and Nick. I would look, but you see how slow the menu's going? I'm holding the stick. It's because it's trying to load the driver 3D modelling at the same time, so it makes scrolling all the way up take forever. Okay, so that tips it in favour of Mick Schumacher. We will keep him for at least half a season more. Let's compare him to make sure we're making the right decision. Well, I mean, Mick Schumacher has 31 base experience, but, you know, so does Mick Schumacher. Don't worry, I'm not going to fuck with you. Let's just... I tell you what, shall we lowball him? Should we try and cut his salary? Given that we've got Nick de Vries as a backup, do we try and negotiate him down? Let's go for a high-risk approach. He's declined our offer. What does that mean? Can we not approach him again? Oh, said Vettel, 13.5 million. We're not far off being able to afford him, actually. We just couldn't afford anything else. Esteban Ocon's 9 million. Let's see if we can keep him at current rate then. Oh no, we can't approach him again. Okay, well that's decided it then. Nick de Vries. I'm going to lowball him as well. Might as well, right? The power's in our hands. There's only 22 seats on the grid, so... He's turned us down as well. Maybe I should stop being so tight with money. Oh shit. Those were like the 2 best options. Okay guys, who, me or Nick de Vries? Hey, there's worse people to be like. Eddie Jordan, you know. Jack Aitken is the best 2 million a season driver at 69, and he is a better base driver than Jordan King at 3 million, or Nicholas Latifi at 4.5 million. I'm going to say, if we're going for now, we've had 2 people turn us down. If we're going for the best driver, yeah, let's lowball Russell. Yeah, why not? We might get a cheap George Russell. It's a win-win, because if he says no, then we can still invest in a factory. Driver demands 9 million, Spec 1 personnel, and look at that, that's really cool. One other team is interested in them. I wonder if we missed that. Or maybe it only applies to drivers who are already on the grid, so let's negotiate.
You have to accept every offer that comes your way. You should, however, accept an offer before the timer reaches 0. When you turn down an offer, a team may come back with something better. Don't push your luck, though, or negotiations...
Why are you giving me the tips for him? Okay, let's start negotiations. We're in a bidding war with Williams. If they outbid us again... Do we go above 6.25 million? 30 seconds, come on. Ah, they've signed him. Can I just say though, I really like that. I really like that. I really like that game mechanic. That is really cool. That makes me super happy. To be honest though, I mean, actually it could bankrupt them. And I'm sure the rules of the game don't let them get bankrupted. Okay. For me now then, it's between Aitken, Matsushita or Calderon, I reckon. Because I don't think we want Magnussen or Giovinazzi, do we? And Latifi's a terrible value prospect at this point. What do we reckon, guys? What do we reckon? Is 7.5 million a good price for fantastic, majestic Italian hair? Could be. Yeah, probably. He would look good on a poster, wouldn't he? I'm going to go for... His pace is actually really good, 80 pace. K-Mag's on my radar watch, but it might be a Season 3 thing. Russell I was prepared to go for because we could offer him a genuinely better seat and he might actually pull in some results for us. K-Mag, it's hard to say. And actually Matsushita is equal to or better than Schumacher for 500,000 less. Can I not make offers anymore? Why is it not letting me make offers? I have to jog time on more. That's all the negotiations I had. Ah, so other teams are going to... Oh, this is tricky.
You're currently in a rivalry. Sooner or later, you'll probably be asked by the media...
Go to driver market.
...to be your rival. Think carefully who you select. While you will receive a claim for beating them, you'll lose a claim if you fail to do so.
Yeah, I've dialed enough numbers now. But hey, on the upside, at least we have cost Claire Williams an extra few $100,000. I'm not going to lowball Matsushita, I'm just going to make a medium risk offer. Perfect. So he's on a half-season contract now. It fits into the Honda theme. And at the halfway point, we can always try some of those drivers again. But I do love the job Codemasters have done on the contract negotiation model, that you can extend 3 offers and then time has to jog on and all these drivers are negotiating with teams. That's super cool. That gives us quite a lot of money to invest into the factory. So, I will defer to chat one more time. Do we improve marketing? Do we invest in durability? Or do we let durability lag and start putting one of the other 4 areas onto Spec 2 so we can unlock more of the tech tree? Because at the moment, you know, we're close to maxing out the tech tree. Team activities. That will cost us 2 million. That still gives us enough to play with. Yeah, it will actually, you're right. Well, the goal really, I think, is to take a step forward again in terms of results. Ideally, have a car that can get our second driver out of Q1 at least, consistently. No, we haven't already paid for the engine. That's a good point. Let's save some money. It's our first end of season, so I don't know when I have to have money on hand. Let's go chat to Pretty Will Buxton and see what he says. Well, a P5 or P4 in the constructors, yeah.
Invitation to your HQ. Let's have a little chat about the team's performance this season. Your team's had their first win in Formula One. Is this a sign of things to come? Your second driver really seems to be improving at a rapid pace. How dedicated are they?
We demand this level of dedication from all our staff, or we crush them.
Stuck in the mid-tier at the moment. Are you happy here, or will you be aiming to challenge the top teams in the near future?
I wouldn't call it stuck. You can't go from rookie to legend without passing through the mid-tier. I agree, yes. But interestingly, that seems to be the wrong answer because we got no bonus from it.
Orders. Your career comes first in your team.
I can say that because it's not even come up yet.
Second driver being long-term, or will you be looking for someone else if you're successful?
If they can develop as fast as a team, their position is safe. That's been true actually, because the drivers we've dropped
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
haven't really. Although Mick Schumacher we only dropped because, yeah, some of them need to be reworked up higher. I totally agree. It's not the best question-answer design, but I'm sure it will be refined. There is no way to do team orders, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes up at some point, because they're building a genuine management sim, right? And team orders are a factor, so I wonder if the management of your team here is like a dry run for the management game. So in the past, they've patched in functionality, not in every version of the game, but if you remember the voice control for your MFD, that was actually, at least on PC, that was a patch that was, you know, partway through the life cycle of that game. It wasn't a launch feature, so who knows. Right, I'm going to advance to the end of the season just to make sure we have enough money to put an engine in the car. End of season, what happens? Well, the activities we did boosted our marketability. Yeah, well, based on my my first start to the season, where the game did hard crash and have to be reinstalled. Okay, so oh wow, we get an extra 7.5 million from our Chinese overlords for completing a full season. That gives us a huge amount of money actually for next season. We could actually improve the power unit if we wanted, but I like Honda, that's the problem. And like McKinley Honda sounds right, but McKinley Renault or McKinley Ferrari or McKinley Mercedes, they kind of sound a bit off, but off we go. Let's see where the cars end up, let's see where the drivers end up. Well, we know that now. McMurk does work fine, actually, you're right. Alright, well, here we go. Another democratic vote from chat. Pick your engine supplier. It would be, wouldn't it? But I'm guessing that they don't. It would be nice if you could build your own engine. Or, yeah, license Cosworth. Okay, so it's time to prepare our team for next year. And we are going to do that now. I'm keeping my helmet. Actually, no, I'm not. I've decided I'm prepared to compromise on the helmet to get something that looks good in our team colours. But our race suits for next year I have unlocked, and they're going to look badass. If the game doesn't crash. Come on, game. Come on, I believe in you. I believe in you. You can do it. Those of you who've watched the earlier streams will know which one I'm going for. I'm not, mate. No, this is just the way it runs. It's poorly optimized at the moment. Okay, so now I have to think very carefully. It's very slow loading, very, very slow. Okay, guys, the bit that's red now, I was going to make that purple. purple and black with white sponsors, but I prefer purple and white with black sponsors, but the black sponsors don't tend to show up so well. Alright, hold on, let me make that bit white, a bit shaded, so the team logo doesn't totally disappear. And then here we'll have, and cue me now struggling to find the correct shade of purple. I think it's that. But you see what's happened? The sponsor logos are in white and they've disappeared. I will definitely change the gloves as well. So I'm guessing we have to go purple and black again on the race suit, which is annoying. It is annoying. I won't go full black though, I'll go like a darker purpley black. What do we reckon to that? That looks a bit better, doesn't it? Do you know, I'm not even going to defer to chat for that one. Democracy is suspended. I think that looks better. Then in terms of gloves, we'll get ourselves some nice new fancy gloves. No, let me get closer to the camera. It's a Ride Snowboards beanie. Well, yeah, lol, it looks like an oven mitt, doesn't it? It's the sudden spur of confidence comes from the fact that I believe deeply that it looks good, and that anyone who disagrees is wrong. So suddenly I'm brave enough to just go ahead and do it without validation from you guys. It doesn't mean I don't love you, it's just sometimes a man's got to strike out by himself. Purple and white or purple and purple? Let's see what the purple and purple looks like with the different shades. That needs to be a bit darker. It's kind of like that. Love at first sight. Oh, all is forgiven, Cody's. You've put a pun in the achievement. Okay, so that's how our race suits will look for next year. Let's take a look at my helmet, which is an invitation that will not cause a stampede. We've unlocked some pretty interesting designs. I kind of liked that, but the sponsors don't show up on it again. I could go for something like this because it's kind of the same design that we have on the race suit. But unfortunately, I still only have 9 helmets unlocked. I don't like that. I'm not even sure what that's supposed to be. Might we see how it looks in our colours? Well, not good is probably the answer. No, come on, Ben, play nice. Give it a chance to impress you. What do we reckon? It's a bit too blue still, isn't it? It needs to go back into the realms of purple. Exactly. That's what I was aiming for. You're on the same wavelength as me, Watch. It's an outfit that says, I can bake a souffle with minimal fuss. What about this? Could this work? If we get the... Actually, let's make that... Yeah, this bit has to be white because there's no sponsors visible on it. The black can become purple. And then the middle bit. It's actually really hard. What I was really hoping for, yeah, too much purple. That just looks horrible now, doesn't it? That looks really bad. What if we take my traditional... It does, doesn't it? I was really hoping Codemasters would let us have our own helmet design, but they've never done it. Like the best you can get is some templates that you can colour change, but you can't colour change the sponsors on it, so it can end up looking really shitty. And I can't place the sponsor logos in any different way. I really hope that that's something that comes later. I'm just going to keep my traditional normal black and orange helmet, but I'll change the colour to purple, and that way it looks less garish. There we go. We can always tweak it on the next stream, because I didn't plan to do this now, but we have to do it if we want to go into next season. Team details. We can't change any of that yet. Livery select. Okay, I'm going to show you the livery I put together as an idea for next year. Some of you have already seen it. Oh no, apparently it didn't save it. That was the original livery that we had, but it doesn't work because the sponsors don't show up on it. I'll tell you what, I did quite a good job with that, didn't I? At some point maybe we'll go black and orange, and I can have my helmet back. Let's get rid of this British Racing green one because it's fucking horrible. And I've unlocked some more liveries, so shout up if you see something that you think could work, but because we do actually have quite a lot more choice. There are metallics in this game, look. Look, they're there, I can see them. They exist. Why can't I select it as like a proper... Oh, hold on, we could do something with this. Definitely. Yeah, it's purple time, baby. Just have to find the right shade of purple, of course, but... Oh, yes. Yes, look at this. Look at this now, boys. And then what colour do we go on the other bit? This menu's so unintuitive. I still think that needs to be a bit darker to be truly the team's colours. Yeah, that looks a bit better. Okay, and then this sort of grey is taking the edge off a little bit, so that looks horrible. So we know, we've learned now that we have to stick with a darker palette to get this to work. I feel like I'm just making a mess of this now. It had potential, didn't it? And I've fucked it, is what I've done. Ah, hold on. It does. If I can find the... What's annoying me is there's like a grey underneath the metallics and it's bugging me. If I can get the shade of purple correct as like a base layer, then the rest of it on top I can probably work out the kinks on. Do you know what I mean? That kind of like washed out grey on the engine cover. But it might actually look good out on track. It's just it's just not the best right now. Tell you what, I'm going to take it. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to take it as a testing livery. Yes, me, guilty, Wodge. I do. We'll call it a testing livery, and we can decide later. And after all that, it didn't even change it. Team badges staying the same, team colours staying the same. Right, let's advance next year and see what we wanted to see. We're doing a 22 round season, of course. I like that it gives you the chance. Let's bump it to 90. They didn't get enough Freddos, that is definitely true. Everything else I'm going to keep the same. Let's see if there's any news. Messages. Let's check the standings. Has no one changed teams? Or is it just not announced yet? I guess it's just not announced yet because the sponsors will run out before the season begins, I think. Yeah, it does seem a bit forgettable, doesn't it? The Rich Energy looked kind of okay, but I preferred when they went, they had like white in their livery and it actually looked quite crisp. Okay, activities. Do a merchandise sale, advertising campaign, aero and chassis focus, which is what I did previously, power and durability, driver training camp, yes. Fuck yes. That screwed us though, because the car reveal's in a really stupid place. How many days do we... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so actually, driver training camp I'll drop. And we'll do a 7-day thing here. Aero and chassis focus because it gives us a lot of resource points. And then we'll do a driver training camp because that's a huge boost to Nobuharu Matsushita's what's name? We'll do the testing livery car reveal, complete the training camp, maybe order some factory bits, and then I have to call it a day, guys. But this is what you get for your car reveal if you haven't seen it yet. It doesn't look too bad in the dark, does it? It's like a fat girl at a disco. And of course the livery's not final because the sponsors will all get changed. And I might change the colour of the sponsors. I tell you what, the Rich Energy Twitter last year, that really was a highlight for me. It's very purple attire, and normally, like, the colour scheme was always purple and white. I would never normally go full purple, but white on these metallics, it just didn't look like it was going to work. But that's why I'm not sure if it's the final livery or not. It looks like... do you want to hear the weird thing? If you go back to... there were some episodes of the Failcast podcast last season. I got in touch with a Dutch shipping company who happened to have 3 cases of Rich Energy, and I bought one off them for just under €40 with delivery. And so I have drunk many cans of Rich Energy, and I'm a guy who drinks a lot of energy drinks, and I'll be honest, it is actually better than Red Bull. It tastes nicer, I thought. But obviously they weren't better than Red Bull on the racing track. Our R&D points have come in. Let's see what we can... Magnetic compound... well, they're both made in Austria, but they do taste different. I've tried them both. They do taste different. But it could be they come from the same factory. It's entirely possible. No, underneath the shrink wrapped label is just a silver can, I'm afraid. I did check to see if it was a label stuck on something else. And we've got room for a major weight redistribution as well. Oh, this is really good. It won't all be there, of course, for the first Grand Prix, but we're going to max out our tech tree very soon, so we have to decide where we want to specialise. That's probably a problem for future stream. Okay, yes, my friends, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me on this Sunday evening, afternoon, whatchamacallit. I hope you've had a fantastic weekend, and Monday is kind to you. I really do appreciate you coming to hang out. It's always fun having a bit of a natter and seeing what we can achieve. New Look Failcast podcast starts this Saturday, 4 PM UK time, 5 PM if you're on mainland Europe. It will be all fancy and new, as I've said. I do have a can kicking around somewhere. I'll have to dig it out for you. Other than that, there might be a midweek stream. I don't know, because all my new equipment's arriving and I want to test it and set it up and not just go live like an idiot before I know what I'm doing. Not that that's ever stopped me before. Anyway, take care, guys. Huge thank you for spending some time with me. I do appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Ciao for now.